Today is the day that Craig Thomson was formally charged. Not civil charges, criminal charges. And there are 150 counts of fraud. What he's alleged to have done at the Health Services Union has been well discussed and well detailed on this program for the best part of the past 2 years. Craig Thomson, however, got himself into a particular moment of strife today, and he needed half a dozen police officers to turn up and formally arrest him, because true to form, Craig Thomson has never actually spoken to the Victorian police. While he's given plenty of interviews, while he's stood up inside the Parliament, while he's attempted to look as many political people in the eye as possible and say, I'm innocent, the people that he has never actually spoken to are the Victorian police. And late last year I had a conversation with his rather colourful lawyer, who pretty much said that that was his advice. The advice to Craig Thomson was to not speak to the Victorian police. As was revealed today by the head of the fraud squad in New South Wales, Cole Dyson, the reason half a dozen police officers turned up to his office today on the New South Wales Central Coast is precisely because he has not spoken with Victorian police. I understand from those inside the investigation that he was given at least 2 very significant warnings towards the end of last year that it was time for him to come down and have a conversation with them before Christmas. While he said that he didn't want to go down before Christmas, apparently the final offer was given in early January to say, all right, Christmas is now out of the way, we've got a heart, but it's time for you to come down to Melbourne and tell us your side of the story, something he has not done. Therefore, the police put on the best show that they could and the biggest show that they could, and that show is 100% Craig Thomson and his lawyer's fault. It is not a matter for the media, it is not about politics. Today's show of force from police was exclusively the decision of Craig Thomson. In a moment, I'm going to talk to Cathy Jackson, the lady who used to be with the Health Services Union and was their National Secretary. We spoke so frequently last year about the lengths in which people inside the Health Services Union tried to stop this investigation from happening, and also, as she has said today in other forums, the extent that some current members of the Labor Party went out of their way to offer her a seat in Parliament to shut up. A lot has been said, a lot is still to be said, but I think something is also worth noting when it comes to, did the Prime Minister know or not know that this moment was imminent? We all knew, if you know anything about this case, that this moment was going to happen sometime this year. But it is beyond convenient timing that the Prime Minister shocks the political world yesterday, and then today, one of the MPs, the most tainted, probably the most tainted vote in the Parliament, the one that keeps her in power, Craig Thomson, is charged with not 1, not 2, not 10, not 100, but 150 counts of fraud for the alleged misuse of his credit card when he was at the Health Services Union. Mark Riley made a very interesting point at the end of his package tonight on 7 News. Pay attention, because this isn't a conspiracy theory. It seems like it was a tactic all along.
Knowingly or not, Julia Gillard has bought herself some insurance by announcing the election date early. 7 News has learnt House of Representatives practice allows the Speaker to delay any by-election until the general election, if the date of that general election has been announced. It's happened once before when independent Phil Cleary was forced to step down in the seat of Wills. The by-election was delayed for almost 4 months to coincide with the 1993 election.
Make of that what you will, but obviously if the proceedings go exactly the way that Craig Thomson doesn't think they're going to go, that will become an issue that clearly the Prime Minister was somewhat nervous about, at least, if she didn't know that this moment was coming. I'm pleased to say that a lady that I've had a lot of respect for a very long time now. It's hard to believe that we've been talking on and off for about 18 months to Cathy Jackson, but she's been aware of the way the Health Services Union worked, and more importantly, hasn't worked for a whole lot longer than that. She is the National Secretary of the Health Services Union, and she joins me here at Sky News. Cathy, hello.
Hello.
Today is a day that it was only made possible because 18 months ago, you were the one who was able to walk out of that national executive and basically started the ball rolling, speaking to police, made the complaint formal. Obviously, it's now in the hands of the courts. But how are you feeling today after all of the pressure, all of the resistance, and frankly, all the crap you've been through in the past 18 months?
Well, I suppose I feel a touch relieved, but it's not all over. There's a process that we've got to go through. But more importantly, I'm concerned about what's happened in that 18 months. We have the national president of the union standing up before the media today saying it's all fixed, it's all gone away. Well, it hasn't gone away. You know, the organisation turns a blind eye to this stuff. Now he's pontificating it's all okay. He's standing there in the national media today saying, you know, he'll wait for the police outcome and then he'll act. Well, you don't have to wait for a police outcome. The organisation can act and should have acted. The organisation, as I've repeatedly requested, should be calling for a royal commission into this stuff. And they're silent on that. We should be seeking changes to the electoral laws in the way union elections are run, particularly after what we've seen at the HSU.
4 years ago is when Fairfax first put out the story, and the reason why the House of Cards has fallen in and around Craig Thomson is because he was, in my opinion, stupid enough to try and take them on for defamation. He then made things a whole lot worse when he jumped on the radio in 2010 and spoke to Michael Smith as part of Fairfax Radio and admitted that he had signed off on the expenditures that we have all now spoken about time and time again. 4 years ago, what was the mood inside the Health Services Union about trying to make this one go away? Did they think they had dodged a bullet by the defamation proceedings and basically no one really talking about it until it came back 18 months ago?
Definitely. I think that initially the organisation went through a very vigorous process where we got external auditors in and had all that stuff looked at. But what I found quite disturbing is the lack of will from the National Executive to prosecute this matter, as you would to any other employee. As I've said previously, you know, had it been a rank and file member, and we get lots of these situations where a rank and file member's, you know, disciplined and then, you know, sacked because, you know, they take a food tray back into the kitchen and eat a leftover sandwich. They're not waiting for the police to come in and see, you know, who took this sandwich. The employer can make a decision to prosecute. And as the employer, my view was at the time that the organisation should have taken action. But what we see instead is the same old stuff, and you can relate it back to the, you know, the AWU matter. The AWU matter, everyone just thinks it's all going to go away. You talk about it, you know, you don't talk about it, deny, and it's all going to be okay. And my view is it's not going to be okay. I'm sick to death of this stuff. Rank and file members are sick to death of this stuff. And more importantly, what you see is, you know, the machine, as I've well seen, the ALP and the union machine coming in to shut people down. And that's what they do quite effectively and ruthlessly.
And that's what, and we've spoken about this in the past, but I think it's important tonight that when you've got people, including the current president of the HSU, pretending that they've been playing along with this the whole time, over the 4 years, it's everything from subtle threats, direct threats, bribes in way of positions in Parliament. They come at you from all angles, don't they, to make sure, shut up, let's keep this one in-house.
That obviously happens, but what happens in a very sort of cult-like fashion is that you can't speak outside the organisation. That, you know, the greatest complaint against me is I didn't deal with it internally. And what I say to that is, I tried dealing with this internally. I tried and tried and tried. But instead what I got was, and, you know, let Chris Brown say this didn't happen, that we have to protect the government. And I am a Labor person. I'm from the left, I'm a unionist, and I will always be of the left and a unionist. What I won't do, though, is cover up stuff that I know is wrong, they know is wrong, and, you know, it's not in the best interest of the membership. Today we saw on national news Chris Brown standing up there with Diana Asmar, from the new elected Victorian Secretary, who did win that election, but how did she win that election? That's what I want to know. You know, and if I had millions of dollars, it'd be an election inquiry. Yeah. But I don't have millions of dollars to run an election inquiry. And people like Marco Bolano, the former Victorian Secretary, salt of the earth, hard-working man, the most honest unionist that I've ever worked with, is on the scrap heap because other unions and the machine supported Diana Asmar, the preferred candidate of Minister Shorten and co. You know, they're little poodles that it's going to do the right thing by the organisation. She's on the telly tonight talking about how there's going to be, you know, she's got the auditors in. Yeah. Well, what I have to say to her is, you can have the auditors in as much as you bloody like, because the Darebin Council report will come down, and I want all the media around this country to see what the Ombudsman comes out with that Darebin Council report and her involvement in that.
I wanted to show Chris Brown, because we spoke about him before. This bloke is the current national president of the HSU, promising the world's going to be cleaned up. Have a look at what he had to say today.
The fact that people are being brought before the courts is evidence that this is coming to an end, that we are getting to the stage where people will be brought to account for what has happened in the past, and that's positive from the union's point of view in that we can put this behind us and we can move forward.
Now, Cathy, how can they say that they're putting things behind us? And also, I don't know if you're willing to talk about this, but what lengths, if any, did Chris Brown go to try and stop this from ever coming to light?
Chris Brown, unlike Chris Brown, I can be gracious and, give credit where it's due. Chris Brown was concerned about what was happening at the union. I'm not saying he wasn't concerned about what was happening at the union, but ultimately, as we have all seen, as I've seen firsthand, everyone was prepared to toe that line. That yes, we were going to deal with it, but we had to deal with it internally. And my view was, and still is, that when we have a situation where the membership are saying to the union what is happening in that organisation, particularly after Thomson went on to, and I don't want to talk about the specifics, but he went on to the Mike Smith radio program and said all that stuff. Up until then, it was like, it could be whatever. But after then, as the organisation, as the leadership of the organisation, we should have taken action. We didn't have to wait anymore. There was no reason to wait. But as always, it's always about, first and foremost, protecting the government and the membership coming second. And I'm not prepared to do that.
Now, in terms, we've spoken about the lengths of which people put the pressure on. In the past 18 months, we've spoken about the stuff that has happened to you. We all know about the shovel out the front of the house, but also now to the extent that, and I ask you this as a private citizen, is that the rest of them are not talking to the National Secretary. I mean, the not so subtle shunning and punishment for you being the whistleblower has been pretty extraordinary.
I thought it was going to be bad, but I never thought it was going to be this bad. And what I find quite distressing and disheartening is that after 22 years at the Health Services Union, for all of it to come to an end like this, if you want to call it the end, is pretty distressing. And more importantly, not one of them had the courage to stand up with me, other than to say that we were doing the same thing too. Well, you weren't doing the same thing. And what I say to Chris Brown is, you be up front, you go out to the membership and tell the membership about your discussions with Michael Williamson about framing me. Go talk to Strikeforce Carnarvon. Be upfront about why you appointed the union ombudsman. That was a witch hunt to get, to go after me. They appoint an ombudsman after they wanted to get rid of the ombudsman. And what I say to that is, that all will come out. I went to the National Executive seeking a Royal Commission in this stuff. I went to the National Executive about making sure that we have electoral reform in the union movement to make sure that electoral funding is capped, that there's a full disclosure. No support there. And then he talks about how there's going to be clean elections in this organisation. Well, let me make it quite clear as a private citizen, there's not clean elections at the HSU when you have a bizarre situation like in New South Wales, where you have a rank and file team running in the union election against the incumbents. And Gerard Hayes and all those people could pretend they're not incumbents. They were all there with Williamson. Every single one of those people sat at those meetings and voted lockstep in a robotic fashion. I was sanctioned for calling them, North Koreans and all that sort of stuff. I stand by that. I was at those meetings. That's exactly what they did. And yet we had the ALP and other unions, and you all know who they are, funding that election. Because I'm pretty sure Gerard Hayes didn't, fork out $300,000 for his campaign to win that election under, when Katrina Hart, rank and file member, and her team, the Ted Hinge Katrina Hart team,
good lady.
She loses by a handful of votes when we had the whole ALP machine and Sussex Street putting in every resource to making sure that union wasn't lost. And that's what it's ultimately about, and that's what I'm not going to put up with. The Australian union movement, unlike, and I've studied this stuff, they probably hate this, but, they sent me off to Harvard to do this stuff. You look at the US unions, I'm not saying, it's not a real comparison, but it is in the way where the US unions aren't aligned to the Democratic Party or they're not aligned to the Republicans. The union movement in the US will support, depending on what campaign and what part of the workforce their membership is in, might support a Republican, on the council of some, some county or whatever, depending on who the police force or whoever's engaged by.
Yeah.
But in in Australia, what we see and what I've seen after 20, 22 years is that, ultimately, I think it hasn't been about the members. I'm not saying this is true of all unions, but in the HSU, it hasn't been about the membership. It's making sure that people are elected to positions that have power, and that power is used to make sure candidates that are compliant to the factional people are pre-selected and, get a seat in Parliament.
Two last things here. I think that there is, and we've spoken about this before, but I think that there is beyond a need for a simple inquiry into what you're talking about, and beyond a simple inquiry into the almost suggestions of obstruction of justice that have gone on here to stop this case from getting to ultimately a place where police thought it was significant enough to charge Craig Thomson and the member for Dobell. Now, we have two governments in both Victoria and New South Wales that do not have the connection to the union movement. I have no idea why they won't have either separate judicial inquiries, a joint royal commission, because that's where we need to go. It might be too big a task to go into the entire union movement, but to work out what happened here, who covered up for who tried to stop this happening, only a judicial inquiry or a royal commission can make that happen, and the only people who can make that happen are the two premiers that are watching us right now.
That's right, and I call on them, as I have for, probably close to a year now. I think we need a judicial inquiry, be it a royal commission or any other sort of inquiry, to find out so people can freely give evidence. Look what ICAC discovered, for God's sake, Yeah. It works. People are compelled to give evidence. You can't not turn up. And people need to know what happened. And hopefully at the end of this, we have a better union movement, a union movement that's there to represent rank and file members and to make sure that this never happens again. That's what I want to see. I'm not going to have support of the union executive, of my union, but I'm pretty sure the rank and file members are supportive, and people will see this and think, well, they're not, because all these candidates lost the election. And what I say to that is, the members are disengaged. People are really pissed off. People are thinking, when you look at New South Wales, out of, 33,000 or 28,000 members, 7,000 I think voted.
Yeah.
The membership isn't engaged. They don't try to engage the membership. But what I want to leave with is to say that this has been a pretty hard process for me and my family, and people that supported my position. And it wasn't just my position. Health professionals in Victoria, people like Kate Wilkinson and that committee of management that I ran in Victoria, always did the right thing. These people are salt of the earth, hard-working health professionals. The same in Victoria with the Marco Bolano Victoria No. 1 branch. They stood up with me and said, this is wrong. What's happening in this organisation is wrong. And what we see instead is that the machine, be it the ALP or other unions, coming in and, basically discrediting all of us just to protect the government. And that's what it's been about ultimately, because if there wasn't a one-seat majority in this, a hung parliament, this wouldn't be happening.
Exactly.
This would not be happening.
And also, just finally here, I want to reiterate what I said at the start here, is that the reason why half a dozen police officers turned up to Craig Thomson's office today was because he has never spoken to the Victorian Police. For a man who has constantly said how his version of events, he's never picked up the phone, never done an interview, he's never done it, and his lawyer told him not to. So literally, if anyone wants to feel sorry for themselves today, the show that was put on today outside his office, that's Craig Thomson, right? He's to blame for that.
Oh, definitely. But instead of him talking to the police and what he should have done at the time, he was going out there discrediting good, honest people, saying things like, Marco Bolano set him up with prostitutes, I hate him, and that's, I've got a vendetta, and that's why I took the action that I did. I did not take the action that I did because I have a vendetta against anybody. I took the action that I did because it was the right thing to do by the membership. And if people can't live with that and want to, make me the pariah of the union movement because I acted in the way that I thought that we have to act if we're to regain the trust of our members after what had happened. It wasn't as if the story had just broken. This was bubbling along for months.
Exactly.
And there was hear no evil, see no evil, put your head down, say nothing, it's all going to blow over. And the more you saw this happening, this was like a year, 18 months before I even went to the police. Before that, it was always, it's all going to go away, the Prime Minister's going to be fine, every kiddie got a prize.
Yeah, correct. Kathy, I'm sorry you've had to go through what you have gone through, but there are more good people than bad, and you've done the right thing. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
Good on you. Kathy Jackson, National Secretary of the Health Services Union, speaking to us this evening as a private citizen.